No, I just want to say this orca's name is Fluke, but we didn't know that this orca was named Fluke, so he's not really named after Fluke.
That's okay. He could still kind of be named after him, right? I think that's cool.
I know that is cool.
All right, guys. Well, awesome. Well, if you're joining us for the first time today, which last class we had a few that were here for the very first time, we want to say welcome. We have Lucy Martin here who's going to share our presentation with us today, which is awesome. She did last week's, and every week we're just taking a little bit of time, maybe about 20-30 minutes with the activity, and we're going to build a little bit more on the Southern residents so that you guys know a lot more by the end of the month. But the first thing we usually like to do when we start off is just put a poll up, and it's going to ask you if you've ever been to one of our events before, where you're Zooming from today. We realize it's probably from a classroom, a living room, a bedroom, but we kind of want to know like where in the world you are. And then I did change the Orca question at the very end to kind of fall in line with what Lucy's going to teach you today. So I'm interested to see what your answers are. I'm going to try to launch the poll, and what happens once I do that, or Cindy might have to do that, is if you pull your microphone off mute, the poll is going to disappear on your screen. So if you guys keep your mute on, you'll be fine. It'll only take you maybe a minute to fill out the poll. We'll go over the results, and then I'll let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll let Lucy go. So let me see. Yep, it's giving me the same notice it gave me last week. So Cindy's going to launch the poll for us.
Okay, you should be able to see that. It asks if you've ever been to one of our youth events before, either in person or virtual. Where are you Zooming from today? How many people are in your Zoom party today? And then the last question is, how can you identify individual orcas? And for the second question, where are you Zooming from today? If you chose other, can you write in the chat where you're Zooming from? We love to see where everybody's joining us from. All right, I think we have most people. We'll go ahead and give it another minute. Just let me know when you want me to end it, Amanda.
Everybody getting close to finishing? If not, you can always put your answers in the chat too. All right, Cindy.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Ooh, looks like we have a 50-50 split on people who have been to one of our events before and people who are joining us for the very first time. So welcome. Where are we Zooming from today? Most people from Washington. We have some Oregon, some California, and a few others. And the others are Ontario, Michigan, Arizona. That's pretty cool. Welcome, everybody. How many people are in your Zoom party? Range from 1 to 2 to 4+, and a whole class. So that's pretty exciting to have you all here. And then the last question, how can you identify individual orcas? We had some people who thought they're dorsal fins, some people who thought they're saddle patch, and some people who thought those two things plus the notches, nicks, and scars they get. So Amanda, do you want to tell them what the correct answer is?
I'm actually going to let Lucy present because she is going to tell you what the correct answer
All
is. I
right.
just wanted to see, kind of get a poll of what everybody's thoughts might be. So seems like everybody's on a good path. But before we turn it over to Lucy, Cindy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Cindy Hansen, and I'm the education coordinator for Orca Network. So I work really closely with Amanda and Katie and Wendy and the whole staff at Orca Network. So really glad to see all of you here. Thank you for joining us. And thanks, Lucy, so much for being here to do this for us.
All right, Wendy.
I'm Wendy Sines. I'm the manager at the Langley Whale Center, and I just want to welcome everybody. It's just so good to see you all. And thanking Lucy and Amanda and Cindy for organizing these every week this month. So it's really a great opportunity to learn about our orcas.
Awesome. Katie.
And I'm Katie, and I also work at the Langley Whale Center. And I'd also like to thank Lucy and everyone for putting these on. I have one thing that I want to share with you guys while you're here. We have an exciting new thing that we're selling on our Orca Network web shop and also at the Langley Whale Center. And it's an Orca family art box, which means that it's a box that comes with a whole bunch of supplies, everything that you would need to make 3 projects. Plus she has a YouTube channel that shows you the instructions. So those are for sale on our web shop, so orcanetwork.org, and also at the Langley Whale Center if you're interested. Thanks, guys.
All right, and I'm Amanda Colbert. I work with the education team and the center with Orca Network, and Lucy's doing my job every Wednesday this month, which is bringing you an exciting new lesson with an activity. So I'm going to turn it over to Lucy, and everybody, if we could just keep everything on mute so that Lucy can present uninterrupted. If you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll help you guys out, and then take it away, Lucy.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, just checking. All right, so all good?
Yes, and I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. And just let me know if I ever cut out in this, and we can go back over whatever happened.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so today we're talking about identification methods and how to tell the orcas apart, which is really cool because there is a way we can do that. So I'll do a quick little presentation, and then we have a matching game that we all get to play at the end. So last week we talked about how there are different types of orcas in the Salish Sea. And the first step to figuring out who an orca is and which is to figure out what group they belong in. So just a little review, there are Biggs orcas, or they're sometimes called transients, and then there are the southern resident orcas that we see frequently in the Salish Sea. We see both of them. So the Biggs eat larger marine mammals like seals or sea lions and sometimes porpoise, and they get pretty big, weighing between 8,000 and 16,000 pounds. And they can be anywhere between 19 to about 30 feet long when they're fully grown, so they get pretty big. The southern residents, however, eat salmon, and we talked a little bit last week how they really like their Chinook salmon. So these orcas are a little smaller than the transients. They're still pretty big and can weigh between 6,000 to 12,000 pounds, and can grow to be about 18 to 26 feet long when they're fully grown. So still pretty big, but they're a little bit smaller than the transients. Okay, so how do we tell the whales apart? And so this was part of the question in the poll, but there's lots of different ways. So in the 1970s, scientists started to keep records of all the orcas that they saw in the Salish Sea. And they wanted to know how many individuals there are in each community, meaning how many whales there were in the southern resident population, as well as how many whales were in the transient population. And we talked a little bit about orca behaviors last week, but the part of the whale that can be seen the most often and is the easiest to ID is the dorsal fin and the saddle patch area, so sort of the back of the orca. So the dorsal fin is on the top of the orca's back, and then the saddle patch is the whitish gray colored patch right behind the dorsal fin on the whale's back. Okay, so let's just say we're all at a park on the water and we see some whales and we want to figure out whether they're southern residents or if they're transients or Biggs orcas. So there's a few different differences that you could spot that would help you figure that out. The Biggs orcas tend to have a pointy tip on their dorsal fin, and it kind of looks like a shark. And they also tend to have scars or dark marks or missing notches in their dorsal fins. Because they do eat those larger marine mammals, those animals can kind of fight back when they're looking for their prey. And so they tend to have a little more scarring than the southern residents do. And they also have closed saddle patches, which some of the southern residents have open saddle patches. And you can see here, this is an example of an open saddle patch on a southern resident. An open saddle patch occurs when their black skin sort of creeps down, comes down into that gray cloudy area behind their dorsal fin. So we call that an open saddle patch. The southern residents also have a rounded tip to their dorsal fins compared to the transients, which have a sharper point, a little more like a shark. And they have a little less scarring and fewer nicks out of the dorsal fins because they do eat salmon and fish, and the fish don't fight back, so they don't have as much scarring. Okay, so we'll think back to that little scenario we were talking about earlier. So we're all at the park watching the whales, and so we figured out that they're southern residents because they have rounded dorsal fins. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how to tell the males and the females apart from each other. So each orca's dorsal fin has a slight difference in shape, and the southern resident community had that tip of the dorsal fin is often rounded with less of a sharp point. And the easiest way to tell the difference between an adult male orca and an adult female is that size and shape of the dorsal fin. So in the southern resident community, the male dorsal fins can be about 5 feet tall, which is pretty tall when they're fully grown. And they have a straighter edge on the back of their dorsal fin, the side that's closest to the saddle patch. So in the upper left, you can kind of see that back part of the dorsal fin is pretty straight. It's a pretty straight line, whereas the female has that little curve at the end of it. And females have shorter fins and are often curved, sort of like a dolphin fin. And it is harder to tell the newborn calves, the smaller orcas, apart to figure out if they're male or female because they all kind of have a similar dorsal fin to a female. But through a male orca's lifetime, it does grow taller, and it's a little easier to tell when they're fully grown. Okay, so we figured out that the orca is a southern resident, that it's a male because of the dorsal fin, and now we want to figure out which male it is and which pod it's a part of. So that's when we look at the saddle patch. So those of you on the poll who answered all three, we do use the dorsal fin, the saddle patch, and some of those nicks and scars to figure out which whale is which. So no matter which orca community you look at, which is pretty cool, even those all over the world, every single orca saddle patch is unique. Which is kind of like an orca's thumbprint. You know, humans, no human has the same fingerprint, and no two orcas have the same saddle patch, which is pretty cool. And it helps scientists help them identify them a little quicker because they are all different. So some of the southern residents do have open saddle patches where the black part of their skin sort of comes inside of the gray saddle patch area. And that trait does make it a little easier to identify certain whales a little quicker. So in the upper left, you can see that that's another example of an open saddle patch. So I did just want to talk a little bit about how they're sort of named and categorized. because that'll be a little part of the activity. But the whale at the top left is J27 blackberry. And so that J27 is sort of like a code to tell us which whale it is. So the letter lets us know which pod he belongs to. So in this case, J pod. And then the 27 was given to him because he was the 27th orca that scientists recorded in his pod. So that's where the J27 comes from. And then what's really cool is sort of like how you guys named your stuffed animals. They also have common names. So this orca's common name is blackberry, and it's kind of like how you name your pet, which is pretty cool. So that's how those orcas get their names. So for the activity, I think Cindy will be able to call on you guys, but we're basically going to test your skills and have you guys try to identify some orcas. So if you do have that activity sheet that we sent out in an earlier email and you have that printed out, that's sort of going to act like the key to this game. And I have 6 photos queued up, and you guys can try to figure out which whale is which based on the saddle patch and the dorsal fin and maybe a few nicks that they have, some scratches. So if you guys know and you want to give it a guess, you can raise your hand, and then I think, yeah, Amanda will call on you. And if you didn't print out the activity, I do have the pictures on the same slide, so we can match them that way. Okay, so you guys all ready? Okay. So let's just make sure that you can see that one. Okay. All right, so if you guys want to try to figure out which whale that one is, and then you can raise your hand if you have a good guess.
Guys, you can raise your virtual hand too for those of you that have your screen off, or like I can see Esme's hand is raised, so I'm kind of scrolling through all the videos. Esme, do you want to give it a guess?
I think that's blackberry.
What do you say, Lucy?
You would be correct. That's a good one. Good job. Yeah, so that's blackberry, and you can see that blackberry does have that tall dorsal fins, so he's a male, and he does have an open saddle patch, which makes it a little easier to identify them. Good job. All right, so here is the next one.
All right, Ryan, I see your hand up. You want to give it a go? Oh, you're muted.
I'm guessing that one would be fluke.
Good job. Yeah, that's good. It's a little challenging because the 2 pictures are faced a different way, but you're right, because it's reflected on both sides. So good job. Okay, here's the next one.
Is Fluke a male?
Let me go. I can go back.
Yeah, Fluke is a male.
Yes.
Yep. In fact, he's kind of still growing that fin. So it's a little shorter than 5 feet right now, but he's kind of going through that process of growing it real big and tall like blackberries.
Okay, here's the next picture.
All right, let's give everybody a second. All right, and Julie, your virtual hand is raised. So if somebody there wants to give it a try.
I think it's Notch from J-Pod.
Awesome. Yeah. So Notch is a good one to see how it's pretty easy to quickly identify those with who have interesting little shapes in their dorsal fin. So Notch is pretty cool, and the name is very fitting. So that's good too. Okay, here's the next one.
All right, I've got someone on Jacqueline's screen. Your virtual hand is raised. Do you want to try?
Tell your name.
My name's Lucian, and I think it's Callie.
Awesome. You guys are good at this. It is Callie. That's good. Yeah, that's another example of that open saddle patch, which is good to identify. Okay, here's the next one.
Oh, we have an idea.
How about Charlie?
Racer.
Awesome. Yeah, it is Racer. So Racer has a really interesting saddle patch that's sort of open and then has an interesting little circle fade on the upper part of it, which is pretty cool. So good job. All right, so I have one more, and maybe this one, if you all want to put your answers in the chat, then you all can sort of vote on which one you think.
So while everybody's doing that, I've had a couple questions in the chat about the whales on Lucy's screen, which ones are males and females. And so just to skip back a little bit, she mentioned that calves have really short fins, right? When they're born, they're not being born from mom with that giant 5-foot dorsal fin. So when they become teenagers, the boys, at least, they start growing that fin really tall. Girls will grow their fin a little bit too, but it's usually stops somewhere between 2 and 2.5 feet. But what we see in our younger males until they hit their teenage years, that it's really hard to tell the females and the males apart. So some of those were really good questions. Notch is a male. Racer is a female, Eclipse is a female, Blackberry, Fluke, and Cully are all males. And then there's an interesting story about the one that you guys are about to ID. So I'll let Lucy tell you who that is first. And then Lucy, if you know the story, feel free to share.
I do not know the story, but this one is K20 at Spock. And I just think this one's really interesting because it's a pretty close saddle patch to K34 Cali. They have very similar, but I'm glad that, you know, it's a little hard. This one's a little tricky. But yeah, I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, so Spock is actually a pretty special whale. So this is a female, and it's not that easy to tell because the back side of that dorsal that you were explaining before, Lucy, it sort of got a little straightened out, and her fin grew a lot taller than some of the other females. So for the longest time, scientists were pretty sure, you know, she was starting to grow and go through that growth phase where that fin was growing really tall. And then Spock came into the inland waters of the Salish Sea with a calf. And so everybody went, oh, Spock's not a boy, Spock's a girl. So she is one of the really great examples that we have that, you know, everything you explained today is a really good jumping off point or a foundation to try to tell the orcas apart, but not every single orca kind of fits that bill, right? So you mentioned that, you know, our big transients all have those closed saddle patches, but we have 2 I can think of off the top of my head that have some really interesting like patterns or kind of really light swirls that happen that kind of make you go, oh, that's different, you know? But you've explained it beautifully today. And yeah, Spock's just a really fun one to be able to share with the group because it's kind of showing you that, you know, even the whales can fool scientists that have these, you know, rules in place, but it's fun.
All right, so I will stop sharing and okay, I can see everyone again. Awesome. Well, I think it's really cool. It's a good lead in to next week's where we get to talk a little bit about the individual whales and their families, which is pretty cool. And so some of those naming things at the end that we talked a little bit about is we get to learn a lot about that next week too, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, one more thing I wanted to share with the group before you guys go. This past Sunday for, you know, Orca Month, that's why we're doing this every Wednesday in June, is it's Orca Action Month. So you're learning about the Southern residents, and it's pretty much centered completely around the Southern residents. They're an endangered species. Lucy's going to get into that not next week, but the following, a little bit more about what that means and some of the things that they're struggling with. But we do this to try to bring as much attention to it as we can, and then also ask everybody for help and then kind of show you what that help looks like. So I just wanted to share real quick, we had a big kickoff event on Sunday, which means it was kind of the big opening event that we did for everybody. And all of the videos that we played for this virtual event are up on the Orca Month website. And I say that to you guys, some of them have a lot of research in them, so you probably won't be interested in those. But we asked Dr. Giles to come on with her poop sniffing dog, Eva. So if you've never seen that before, she actually goes through and shows you how she trains Eva to be able to find whale poop out on the water. And there are a couple of other really cute kids videos on here too. And then if you are interested about orcas around the world, we had a bunch of researchers from places like Iceland and Norway and Russia, all put together just a very quick 5-minute video on their orca type that they're researching. So I want to show you guys how to get there on the website. And then Esme, I'll come back to you since you have a question, but I'm going to screen share with you guys real quick. So if you're seeing this, it's just orcamonth.com. So really easy to remember if you put in your browser, and then it's really easy to get around too. So everything you're going to want to know is going to be up here on the top. And if you go to recordings, it will bring up the page where all of these videos are. So for instance, we've got Eba and Giles down here. So the training video, we have some really cool footage of the southern residents from a drone that the Center for Whale Research was able to take. So if you just want to watch some really cool orca videos with them interacting with each other, this is another really great thing to just kind of look at and use. There's a bunch of really neat stuff in here. And then when you get down to the bottom, you'll see some of the different orcas. So the UK orcas, Iceland, Norway. I actually had a ton of fun participating in it myself after kind of putting everything together. And I think you guys really will too. So that's why I wanted to spend a minute and just kind of let you know about that. And there are some hands up. So if you guys have questions for me or for Lucy, let's maybe start with Julie's screen.
So it's not a question, it's just that last week we weren't here, so I couldn't show you. So I made an orca and I turned it into a 3D ocean.
That is awesome. So did you get to go back and watch the video from last week?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, Charlie, do you have a question? No? Okay. And then Ryan, your hand is up. Do you have a question?
I just want to say goodbye. And Fluke also wanted to say goodbye too.
Well, he was featured today.
Bye.
So, bye. And then Esme, I think you had a question also.
More of a comment. So I was watching a YouTube channel called Daily Dose of Internet, and the whale poop sniffing dog came up.
Awesome.
It was kind of odd.
Well, that's really cool. The other place you can find Eva, she's actually considered an honorary Disney princess. So they came out. They came out to San Juan Island and they recorded her in the field doing her job. And then they put it into a small series called It's a Dog's Life. So if you have Disney Plus and you look up It's a Dog's Life, she's actually in the very first episode that they've ever put in that series.
I actually forgot I had Disney Plus for a minute.
Yeah, so that's another really fun one for you guys to see what Eva is up to. She has like the coolest job. She really does. All right, and then I've got a screen or a hand up on Eric's screen. Did you have a question? Whoops. Oh, there you are. Oh, I can't hear you. I wonder if it's your mic. Do you want me to answer the question that you put in the chat? Yeah, is it the one that says, do you get to see orcas? Yeah, Lucy, why don't you, if you're still here, do you get to see orcas out on San Juan?
It's really cool, and I'm really lucky that I do get to see the orcas sometimes. I know I don't have I just sort of happen to see them when I do, but it's been really cool. One of my favorite times I got to see them was my younger brother's birthday party we had on the west side when he was turning maybe 2, and he doesn't remember it, but there was a super pod, and I got to see JK and L pod, and it was really, really awesome. So it is pretty magical when you get to see them.
Well, and Miss Cindy Hansen actually was just coming in from seeing some orcas off the west side of San Juan today. If you're there, you want to tell the kids about your experience this afternoon?
Yeah, I actually just got back just before this started from seeing some of the bigs, the transient orcas that were going by pretty close to shore. In fact, I was just looking at my video as I was listening to all of your great questions. So yeah, it was pretty exciting. They were playing around pretty close to shore.
Yeah, and Wendy and Katie probably have stories too. I think Katie had to hop off. Wendy, do you want to share a story?
Yes, we get to see them quite often off the west side of Whidbey Island. And I didn't see them yesterday, but they were right off of Bush Point, which is near where I live. And I have seen them in Holmes Harbor out of Freeland and in Admiralty Inlet off the west side. It's always exciting.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys for sharing your stories. And then Julie, we have another hand up on your screen. You guys have another question?
We live down on Whidbey Island also, and we haven't seen any this year, but last year we saw some off Snake River fleas.
Nice. Very nice. All right, guys. Well, if nobody else has any questions, you're going to get another email from me the day before our Wednesday presentation next week. So sometime on Tuesday, I'll send you the new activity that Lucy has put together for next week's presentation. And then if you are joining us this week and you didn't join us last week, you can get caught up if you want by going to watch that other video, and I'll make sure that I put those YouTube links up on our Facebook page, and also I'll put them in an email as well. So, and if anybody has any other thoughts, any questions, if not, I'm going to let everybody free for the afternoon. Oh, okay.
So my question is, I know that you can tell from the fin if it's a female or a male, is there any other way to tell?
Lucy, do you get into that a little bit, or do you want me to answer that question?
I would say you can answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's really cool is if they're young, like if you guys have been following the Southern residents this past year, we've had a couple new babies born to the Southern resident community. We had 2 in September, and we had 1 born to LPOD in February. Because JPOD has been coming in a little more frequently, and the babies have been more active at the surface, when they come jumping out of the water, if they come out sideways and their belly is facing the researchers and they can get a very quick photo, they're looking at the underside of the belly. There's some markings on there that will help tell scientists if it's a boy or if it's a girl. And that helps us a lot, because until that fin starts to grow, which isn't fully grown on our males till about 20 years, we don't know for sure right off the bat if it's a boy or if it's a girl. So both of our J-pod whales, we figured out one was a female and one was a male. And the little L-pod baby born in February, they haven't been back into the Salish Sea for a while, and they weren't able to catch that really lucky photo. So it's anybody's guess right now if it's a boy or a girl. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Esme.
How long do orcas live?
Do you
I
have a
mean,
gu-
like, if nothing else harms them, how long will they live?
Lucy, do you go over that too later?
Yes, we talked about that in our last video, but they live really close to humans, which is pretty cool. So when Granny passed away a few years ago, I think she was about 100 years old, which is pretty cool. So yeah, they live a long time.
All right, and maybe one more question from South Whidbey Children's Center. Go ahead.
So do I never can tell if it's a orca fin in the water in Langley Beach or if it's just a buoy. I can't tell because it goes up and down, and then I can't see it from it.
So the other little thing that you guys probably get out there, they're a lot smaller. Lucy told you today that like our big orcas, if they're the big males, they can be about 30 feet. Our southern residents are smaller. So even blackberry that you saw today is probably about 26 feet. So really tall dorsal fins. If you guys see really tiny ones, they almost look like little Hershey kisses at the surface. The way that they come up, there's this tiny little triangular fin and then they go under. They're only about 5 to 6 feet long. So that's probably 5 times smaller than an orca. And there are harbor porpoises that are out there. So they're all gray. Sometimes it's driftwood, sometimes it's birds being sneaky out there. I've been tricked plenty of times into thinking I'm seeing whales and then it doesn't turn out to be orcas. So they can be kind of sneaky too, but yeah.
But can it be other types of whales too?
It could be. If it's smaller or bigger, we have a bunch of different things that are out in the Salish Sea. We get gray whales and humpback whales seasonally. When we have a couple porpoise out there. So
I'm just wondering if baby whales, like, how big are they really compared to big whales?
yeah, when they're born, I think that baby orcas are 6 to 7 feet long when they're born. Is that right, Cindy? Yeah.
Okay, you don't.
All right, guys, I think Charlie, let's take your question. And then just for the sake of time, I think we'll, I don't want to ruin too many things because I know Lucy has a lot of really cool stuff lined up for the next 3 weeks. But go ahead. Charlie, did you have a question? Yeah.
I heard there was a white orca at Hidden Beach a while ago.
Lucy, you want to tell them about that one?
Say you can. I have never gotten to have it. Have you guys been able to see it?
From a very, very, very far distance in binoculars. So it was like ant sized. So I guess I should count it, but
I got to see at Holmes Harbor, very close to shore. Must be in 2 years ago now.
yeah, he's really cool. I would love to see him. So he's not the same dark black color all over his body as the rest of his family. And that happens with genes sometimes. So it's the same thing that like some of us take things from our mom that kind of look alike. Like maybe you got your eye color from your mom and your hair color from your dad, right? So genes kind of have a place in the way that things look physically. And what happened with that little orca is we think some genes that aren't always expressed a lot, which means, you know, it only shows up every once in a while, came together and happened in our little white whale. And his name is Taluk, which is really cool. I think it's I don't know if it's Coast Salish or not, but it's a indigenous word for little moon. So he's a really, really cool whale.
I think one of the orcas on the camera had that.
Yeah. Well, very nice. All right, you guys. Well, Lucy has a lot more for you over the next 3 weeks. So please keep coming back. We're having a great time with you guys on Wednesday afternoons. I hope you're having fun too. Lucy, you have anything else you want to say or?
No, I'm just looking forward to seeing you guys again next week. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. All right, you guys. Well, we'll see you next week.
See everybody.
Bye.
Everybody, thank you.